You will not
My name is Arielle Ahern, and I am the course director for an MSc and MPhil program called Nature, Society, and Environmental Governance at the School of Geography and the Environment. The learning outcomes of the course, well, actually before we attended, at least for myself, I didn't really have clear learning outcomes in mind because a lot of us that are lecturers in our department, we just go from doing intensive research into teaching. So there isn't necessarily a period of time where we're learning how to teach and think about learning outcomes. So one of the key things that the ABC workshop kind of hit home with us is to actually that we need to really clearly think about what our learning outcomes need to be, and that just lecturing isn't necessarily the best way to achieve those outcomes. So it really opened our minds in terms of, okay, we need to clarify what the learning outcomes are for each module, and then think more broadly about the different types of learning that students have and how we could incorporate that into the VLE. In the past, we used WebLearn, and that was mostly just to upload PDF files or PowerPoint files. And so with introducing Canvas, it was a great opportunity to actually think through, how we teach across the board. And we were able to share some nice ideas across the modules as well. So the lecturers were able to share different ideas. So it was really important for us to actually think about those learning outcomes to begin with. At the workshop, we spent time with our lovely colleagues who helped run the workshop. They brought very big storyboards, sort of the big pieces of paper where we can start to think through all of the modules and what types of learning happens in those modules. And one very helpful thing was there was a spider design that we created. I might be using the wrong word, but a little spider design to kind of map out what types of teaching we do now. So a lot of people had a very, it wasn't a very star-like design. It was mostly, lecture, maybe a little bit of discussion, and that was about it. So the amazing thing was that we were able to reflect on what we're doing now, create the storyboard, and really think through each and every class, what happens during the class time, outside of class time, and then to kind of make, at the end, see how our spider design changed. And I think most people saw a pretty significant change. And so that was interesting in terms of then taking that from the workshop and implementing it to make sure that those elements were included in Canvas, and then when we rolled out the modules for the next academic year. The helpful thing about the workshop was that we thought through how we would take the sort of our new design and what it would look like in Canvas. So would we use would we use discussion groups? Would we have pre-class surveys assessing what students' baseline knowledge was? So we had thought through some of the mechanisms that we could incorporate in Canvas. So some of those were relatively straightforward to implement, like, okay, creating a discussion group or creating some short pre-class videos. So it allowed us to plan what to do in Canvas. And so for the people that really took it on board and implemented it in Canvas, we definitely saw a lot more use of short videos. There was lots of attempts to use the discussion boards, which sometimes the students weren't as engaging on the discussion boards because they like to discuss in person. But nonetheless, we allowed more discussion time in class rather than have the whole class just be lecture-based. So we were able to fit that in to the in-class discussion. I think the most valuable thing for me, it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but it actually taught me a lot about how to teach, how to think about teaching, which I didn't have an opportunity to do before because I went straight from research into teaching without a period of kind of learning teaching pedagogy and this kind of thing. So it was actually a really valuable moment to stop and really think through what the module was about that I was teaching, what the learning outcomes were, how best to deliver those things. Because I think for a lot of the early career people such as myself, we just look to see what the more senior staff are doing. And a lot of the more senior staff are just giving lectures, and we think, oh, that's what we're supposed to do, is just give a 2-hour lecture and maybe have 10 minutes of questions at the end. So having the time to actually realize that that's not necessarily the direction that we should be going in was hugely valuable. And having a chance to talk to experts on, how to organize Canvas, ways to structure it, what students have responded to in the past. Those things were incredibly valuable. So I still think about them every time I'm kind of organizing my next class. Yeah, for the VLE, I definitely think that from my experience of going through the process, it feels like having the VLE and the sort of teaching and learning happen together is really important, because you can't really think about how the course or the module or the class will be delivered without thinking through the VLE aspects and kind of, trying to understand what the students will have to go through, what their learning journey is, to grapple with the material, and then to come to class to be able to discuss the material or to understand it. So I feel like having the two together was very, very good, because I can't imagine at this point, having gone through the process of designing a class without the VLE, if that makes sense, because it's so integral to what we do now. But I think probably for other colleagues, they don't, because they didn't go through the workshop and they don't have the tools, or maybe they don't have as much motivation, they don't know how to do those things together. So it still remains sort of like I lecture during my 2 hours, and then this VLE is a separate thing that I ask other people to upload my slides onto. So I think the biggest challenge for me as a course director, because I have to kind of work with all of the lecturers and motivate them to change in some ways, is finding ways to strongly recommend that they actively use their own Canvas. They actively take charge and lead their own Canvas kind of class, because some lecturers aren't doing that. Like they actually just they send their slides to me and ask me to upload them on their behalf, so they aren't doing anything. So we have this huge divide between people who are doing really exciting things. I think I mentioned that I was on location in Kyrgyzstan trying to film some stuff for the VLE, and some of my other colleagues who are doing similar things in terms of like getting material up in advance of classes and creating lots of opportunities to do stuff outside of the classroom, versus the other people who are just sending files to the administrative staff to upload onto the VLE. So yeah, I'm not sure what the solution is, but it feels like teaching and learning would be much improved if more people went through this type of workshop.